Hey, thanks for watching. In this video, Ed Jonawalk, the new Manager of Design Education with ACCA, congrats are in order to him for getting that position, actually between this time and the time that he gave this talk at the second annual HVACR Symposium. But in this video, Ed's going to cover what proper airflow really means. So he's going to be talking a lot about system airflow and a lot about ACCA Manual S. So I think you're going to get a lot out of this. I know it's a little longer, but I think if you stick through it, you're going to learn something new that you're going to be able to apply to the field. Hope you enjoy.
Were the guys yesterday walking up to the camera and getting too close? Because I got to be the first guy that does that. I want to say hi to everybody at home. And I don't know if you're watching me live or recorded, but you came to the right place. So, all right, I got to admit, I got to do stuff that's funny and entertaining because I'm really not that bright when it comes to delivering the material. So when you walk out of here, I either want you to say, oh, I understand what he was talking about a little bit better, or maybe it's going to be, I don't know what he was talking about, but that was pretty good. And I've been making a living at doing that for a long time, all because I happened to show up at a class that I was required to attend, and the instructor didn't show up. They asked me, can you do the class? And I'm like, yeah, I've sat in and on it, 10 or 12 times. Delivered the content. The next day, Harry called Bill. Harry said to Bill, how did Ed do last night? And I quote, Bill Chu said, well, Harry, it didn't suck. That was 23 years ago, something like that. So that's how I got doing what I'm doing. So I'm going to go through my favorite topic, and of course, that's who I am. That's me. I'm employed by a nonprofit, and we predominantly take care of the New Jersey area. We get funding from our local utility programs, but I've been contracted to work. I've done stuff in California. I've done stuff down here in Florida. I work all over the place, essentially who will ever give me money. I've also been doing some stuff with TEC. If you're familiar with the folks at TEC, they have some really good stuff that's just coming out right now, so you should pay attention to that. If you're on social media and you recognize that picture, you might put two and two together with it. That's me and Uncle Leon in 1966. He was trying to get me to smoke back then, and I guess he was successful. So if I was at this event last year, and I knew like 4 people, and I started with this, and people were like, now I know who a bunch of these people are, and it makes it a little bit better, but at the same time, I'm still me, so it's the way it is. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm a licensed contractor in my state. I do a lot of CEU classes for not just New Jersey. I got hooked up with a bunch of people. I'm a CEU provider out in Oklahoma and Idaho and Iowa, and a bunch of these people that talk funny, and they say I talk funny. I don't think I sound like I'm from New York. No, right? Because I'm from Jersey, but I'm from the good part of Jersey, the southern part. I feel just as comfortable doing something for one of my local utilities as I do down in the basement installing ductwork, but I get the pleasure of doing stuff on a national basis, and I guess this would be considered a national. It's been a running joke because I've been saying to my kids since she was little, your dad's nationally known. And 2 years ago for Christmas, I got one of those placards that you stick on your desk, and it had my name and job title, and underneath it, it says nationally known. And she just rolls her eyes. So, and it's what it's all about when you have kids, right? Making their eyes roll. And if you do have the availability, come back when I do the next one, because I build on those photographs. All right, what we're going to talk about is not Manual J. What we're going to talk about is Manual S. Be honest. Have you ever even heard of Manual S? Yeah, we had a couple of people. And I started talking about this before we officially started. And I don't regret much in life. And when I say I regret doing what I did, I do. I'm not heartbroken over it. But if somebody explains the Manual J process to you, and doesn't talk at least a little bit about Manual S, they're doing you a disservice. If you're in a heating-only climate, Manual S doesn't have to exist if you don't want it to. Because when we deal in hot air or hot water, it's all sensible BTUs. That's really easy to digest. What has happened is a lot of people have looked at air conditioning in the same light, and it's not even close. Humid, green grass, arid. Where are you at? You're local? So yeah, you deal with living, well, we call it living in a basement. That's an in-ground, underground swimming pool in this market, right? So you're dealing slab on grade typically. So you can live in a cave then, even though it's above grade. It's disgusting to be in a house that's humid. I mean, we can all agree with that. We're going to have to make, in my mind, what I make people do is make them make a conscious decision to what is more important to them. And is it on the hottest day of the year, do you want to maintain some number, or the majority of the days during the year, do you want to maintain what we describe as comfort? So that's a conscious decision. Can you get both? If you want to spend more money, it's easy to get both. But do most people want to spend more money? And they don't. So if we follow the guidance, we can sort of protect ourselves. You guys ready? I'm going to go through a lot of information, and I'm stealing this from Alex. Alex Meany's the Right Soft dude. He calls himself a steamroller of information. I am not trying to teach this stuff to you today, because I can't. It's way too much information. But as we go through, you're going to start seeing trends. And basically the trend I'm trying to set with you is you got to look at the numbers. And the numbers mean something. And the first 2 times, the first 3 times you go through the math of this, you're just going to be pissed off, right? You're eating lunch, plate's going to meet wall. I've broken keyboard. I'm a venter. If something bugs me, I take the keyboard. I literally have, when Staples has them for $5, I'll buy 3 of them. And I just get really, because I can't do this anymore because I have the tray that slides out from under my desk, and it breaks, the screws pull through the fake wood for my IKEA desk, and then I'm sitting there with the keyboard on my knees, and I don't do good like I take the keyboard and do this, right? But then I'm fine. I plug a new one in, and I'm right back to work. My daughter will come down the basement stairs and see keys on the floor and just go like this. She won't even ask. It only happens once a year, but it makes me feel better. So that's just the way it goes. If you guys have questions, stop me. I may or may not answer you. It depends on where I'm at. So see how it goes. We might get through half of my presentation. We might get through all of it. I'm used to doing a class 30 times. And by the 25th attempt, I'm really good at it. First 2, maybe not so good. But we're going to see what happens. What are our goals? 70 degrees in the wintertime. That's our target. That's what we want to maintain inside the house. Summertime, 75 degrees, a 62-degree wet bulb. Most markets, green grass, 75 degrees in the house, 50% relative humidity. Depending on the county where we are right now. I've done some work for some local contractors down here. Some of the counties, it's 55% relative humidity is our target. Some of them, it's 50. It's whether you're actually designated a humid climate or a green grass climate. And I think right where we're at, you can have across the street be one and versus the other. So you got to look it up. But that's a realistic goal. And it's a goal on a design day. And that's a hard stop. In other words, we're tasked with maintaining a specific set of conditions on a design day. Anything beyond that's gravy.
Simple question. Where would you go to find out if your target is 55 or 50?
Code. Your local code, and I think it's in here, it specifically says, or the code will dictate. And I think we're going to get to actually a piece of paper that talks about that. Yes, sir?
Hey, an online guy, Joe, he's asking when you talk about heating-only climates, where manual S can go away, does Colorado CO count as one of those?
I have no idea what that is.
Okay.
The Colorado CO. Manual S doesn't go away. There's still things that are relevant. This is for the Colorado dude who's asking about heating and manual S. There is still guidance, and when I say guidance, I'm going to use the word guidance, and I'm going to also explain it in a minute about code compliancy. And there are still things, even if we're only heating, that we're still supposed to follow the rules as per manual S. Is this a manual J goal that we're seeing here? And specifically, it's not. It's a design series goal. You can't say, I'm going to follow the rules in Manual J and then stop, because that's not how it works. It's that 1.8 ton gain, a 2 ton unit isn't big enough thing. Got to use the guidance in Manual S to answer that question. So it's a design series. It's all or nothing. do the 500 square foot per ton and a 0.1 friction rate for everything, or follow the design series. Don't cherry pick something that's convenient, because you're not going to end up with what we're after. It's a whole bunch of books is really what it comes down to. And if we have time at the end, I'm actually going to walk you through the design series, but I highly doubt we're going to get there. But we'll see how it works out. For the IT guy, do you have any idea, are people going to have access to my presentation other than the live stream?
They can view it on a via link, but I don't think they have it downloaded.
Okay, at the end or somewhere, you're going to find a way to contact me. I always share my stuff. I'll never put stuff out at something like this and not share it. So, unless it's copyrighted, and if I stole it from somebody, oops. So, they're the important books if you're a residential guy. Manual J, Manual S, Manual D. After lunch, I'm going to be doing the same sort of deal with Manual D. So when we talk about codes, I'm not going to read the whole thing because I want to stop right here. Codes are minimums. That's it. Should you go beyond code? Yes. If the only way you can be profitable is to do minimum code, go ahead, because what's the most important thing we do in our industry? Say make a profit. Make money. Because if we're not making money, we can't impart all these good practices. So we got to make money first, right? And there's nothing wrong with making money. If you're lucky, and I have a bias with this. If you're lucky, you live in part of the country where they follow the International Code Council rules. If you're unlucky, IETMO is what they're following. I've argued with the IETMO people because they want to limit flex, and that's dumb. Right? As long as you pull flex tight, it's good. If you do this, depending on how much you do this, there is some predictability, but not a lot. And they want to get rid of flex, so I don't agree with that. But we're supposed to follow whatever code is local to you. There's language in the IECC codes, right? That's the energy code. They're saying Manual J, Manual S. It's in the codes, all right? ACCA has this stuff available for you. What should the code official actually be asking for? It's in print. So if you've ever uttered the phrase that inspector's an idiot, he was asking me for a whole bunch of stuff that, hard stop again. It's in print. They want to know very specific information. It's the minimum amount of information that you need to do a proper load calculation, equipment selection, and duct design. So what I have found, and again, I work for you guys are familiar with ACCA, right? I work for a mini version of them, right? Like a state version versus a national version of it. And I get phone calls on the regular from contractors where they'll say, inspector's an idiot. He wanted me to put R8 ductwork in the attic. And I'm like, have you ever read the code? Huh? You know, it's just enforcing the code. I would say 75% of the time, people are reactive instead of proactive. And I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but the last time you had to do something and be code compliant because you got called out on it, was it because the inspector was right or wrong? I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some flat-out nitwits in my neighborhood that are code officials. And I say that more or less in jest because it's not fair, because he's an electrical inspector, but he's tasked with HVAC stuff. He doesn't know what any of this stuff is. So if you fill this stuff out and there's numbers in there, well, there's a chance he'll pass it through. It might be wrong. I mean, I've put in duct plans with 2-inch main trunks and 60-inch branch runs. They all get approved. But I know what Bob is looking for. He's looking for thickness, right? He's not looking for accuracy. And this is all the stuff. This is why I asked if participants online or in person, you can look through this stuff. Or you can go on the ACCA website and literally type in code compliancy, and it'll take you to a link, and you can look at the specifics of the stuff that they're asking for. But they're asking for available static pressure. That's one of the things that every time I see somebody given a ballpark or a rule of thumb for what your friction rate's supposed to be. If you're designing a duct system without knowing what your available static pressure is, how in the world can you design a duct system? If you understood what I just said, then I don't care if you show up after lunch. If you don't know what I just said, you better be in here after lunch. So that's the way it goes. And I'm not going to be able to teach you these things in the amount of time that we have, but if you know the difference between sensible BTUs and latent BTUs, with what I'm going to cover today, you should have at least an insight to what Manual S says. Or even better, if you're already following the guidance in that book, you're going to be doing, I'm doing what Ed says. And if your arm's long enough, do one of these. Or come up and say, you know what? I was with you the whole time, and won't be well, the virtual guys, I'll have to do it that way too. Maybe at the end I'll come back and maybe behind the camera, but you won't be able to see that. But can you guys figure out, it's been almost a year since I've done this in front of live people, and more than half of the webinars I do, I'm looking at myself in the screen. That's a scary, I got 3 monitors. I got to put me all the way over here because I don't want to look at this. I feel sorry for you, man. You're so close, but it's just the way it works out. But yeah, once in a while I do them and I can see the people, and I don't want to see you guys either, on people laying back in their friggin' recliners and eating, bigger bellies than mine, and it's falling out and the food's falling down. It's rough. So I'm enjoying this maybe more than you are, so yay me. All right, I don't care if you follow codes or not. If it's a conscious decision that you're going to ignore them, fine. If it's purposeful defiance, remember that you might be in a situation where you don't want to be. And I'm going to say probably half the country, it's not applicable. Where I live, it's very applicable. And if you purposely ignore it, right, it's no defense. I didn't know, and you're putting yourself in the butt-kicking line if you get caught. My state is horrible about stuff. You do a job for 10 grand for a customer and you're found not in compliance with the Consumer Fraud Act, there's no argument. You're not in compliance, they can collect 3 times the cost of the job. So you not only did all that work for free and gave them the equipment, you're giving them $30K on top of it. And it happens. And there's homeowners that play contractors. And if they don't follow the rules, it's their own fault. So I do feel sorry for them a little bit, but if you're not going to follow the rules, you know the game. You got to play the game right. Predictability. I'm not going to say code compliance will give us complete predictability, but it puts us on the path to predictability. Do the math up front, and the systems are going to work. I mean, that's really the way it works out, at least in my mind. I like this chart because I have people that I know that are smart people, people who I respect their opinion, but they'll tell me that your airflow is supposed to be based off of a chart that looks similar to that. I know a guy who said something about he lived in an area that he considered a humid climate, and he was talking about some place that's up here. And when I got up off the floor from laughing, I explained to him, that's not a humid climate, right? The sensible heat ratio of the structure dictates what our airflow is supposed to be. Now, it gets a little bit deeper than that. It's the extended performance data versus the airflow that's recommended. But ultimately, what do we want to do? We want to meet the sensible load. We want to meet the latent load. We don't want to exceed the total load by 15, 20, or 30%. 15% single-stage equipment, 20% two-stage equipment, 30% if it's a variable compressor. We can go home now. That's Manual S in a nutshell. Don't oversize your furnaces by more than 140% to the calculated loss. Right, that's it. But the gap is, do you know how to read extended performance data? I would say on average, half the attendees of any of the classes I do on Manual S don't even know what extended performance data is. Let's take it a step further. It's not uncommon for 20% of the people attending my session are salespeople for distributors, and they are the people that you order equipment from, because people historically have ordered equipment based off of tons. And that's stupid. And that's stupid. Right? That's not how you do it. If you're working for somebody, right, and they're paying you $50 an hour, do you want them to use exact math come payday? Yeah. Or do you want to ballpark it? Yeah, I'll give you a few bucks, right? That's all this is. It's math. And the thing that cracks me up, I'm a Votech guy, and I wasn't very good in school. And here I'm teaching math. And the people I grew up with, they say, you do what? And I'm like, yeah, I teach math. I do. I teach third grade math and sixth grade science to the butt crack brigade. I mean, that's really what I do. And you can, and this isn't condescending, this is encouraging. You can be in the top 10% of your industry by following the simple third grade math and sixth grade science, that these books. Now, there are some real brainiacs that put a lot of this information together, right, for people like me to share, and it's not difficult. You got to put a little bit of effort into it, but when you get a call back on a job that's under warranty, do you get paid for it? No, and we want to avoid that, and that's what all this stuff helps. Sensible heat ratio dictates our airflow. We do a load calculation. It separates sensible and latent BTUs. We take our total BTUs and divide it into our sensible BTUs, and that tells us the sensible heat ratio of the structure. That's all it is. If you're using RightSoft, you're using Elite, you're using Energy Gauge with Quick Model, or any of those programs, somewhere on that page it tells you your sensible heat ratio. They might use different language, but they're telling you it, because all this stuff comes from the same book, right? Manual J, it's where it all starts. And these are actually, these are the good copy and pastes out of the book when I actually got a PDF version of the book. You can see where I took pictures with my phone and embedded them in these, because I'm a mechanic, right? I don't have the ability to do this stuff precisely, so it's kind of the way it works out. But they're telling us, look at the extended performance data. I know people that have been responsible for selecting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of systems, and they don't know what extended performance data is. That's messed up, right? Do you want the guy fixing your car not to know the difference between Ford and Chevy? It's what it is. So what it's coming back to is the design series says, look at your blower data, look at your extended performance data, and follow the guidance in that book. That book can be a little bit intimidating, but it shouldn't be. And I'll explain why in a second. So what does the S in Manual S actually stand for? It stands for selection. I heard somebody say that. Excellent. Cooling systems. It gives us help. Heating systems. It gives us help. Help as in guidance. Forced air systems is specifically what it addresses. It gets into hydronics a little bit, but it stops to a certain extent. Hydronics, I got guys that do boilers. In your market, is it commonplace for the domestic requirement to exceed the space heating requirements? Yeah, and that's me too. I don't live in a cold area. My design temperature is 13 degrees, but I have a 45,000 BTU loss on my house, but I have about a 90,000 BTU domestic requirement. We got the human car wash in the master suite and 2 other showers. Want to be able to run all showers at the same time, and we can with that kind of capacity. And it's a good way to do things, in my opinion, but it's also compliant as far as what Manual S requires. There it is. If you're doing 400 CFM per ton, I can't emphasize it more. You guys know what BCC stands for, don't you? You guys know that, right? It's beer can cold. I can't tell you how many times people will puff their chest. Yeah, I got my measure quick, and I got what's your airflow? Well, it's 400 CFM per ton. You might as well be grabbing that suction line saying it's the proper temperature. People are focused on things, right? And that's good. They want to be precise about that stuff. I embrace that. But you got to do it all, right? So I said this in my preamble before we technically started. This is the trifold that IECC puts out there, and it's a little bit dated because it is actually referencing, and I'm so happy that didn't scream. I thought when I got close to that it was going to break my eardrums. This is the old version. I don't have any of the new versions with me to give away, but before we leave, there's a secret I'll tell you. 3 people are going to get these, and they're the old ones. The idea behind it's still the same. It doesn't have as much good information or current information, but the idea is the same with that book. This is written based off of that book, but if I can explain everything about the guidance of Manual S with regards to air conditioners in that little bit of text, you think it's a pretty simple concept? It is. Right? That's the whole point behind this. And that's it right here. I'm not going to go through it here. Again, this is for if somebody's looking at this in a PDF format or whatever, they can follow along. Capacity. Heating's easy, right? Because all the BTUs are sensible. Air conditioning, not nearly as easy because we drop the temperature with some of the BTUs, and we let the water, or suck the water out of the air with the other BTUs. Is measuring latent BTUs easy? A pint's a pound. Get that air conditioner at steady state, fill this bottle up. You're at the barbecue, you got your slides on, right? You got somebody that doesn't care about what you do for work, but if you can tell them, they pissed me off, they made me angry when they did the thing. They went to 500 milliliters it is. They used to be 16 ounces. It's 16.9 and it messed my math up. I'm bitter. A pint's a pound. And not exactly, but it's close enough. You take a red Solo cup, fill it up in 15 minutes, there's 4,000 BTUs. You think I like to quantify stuff? I got a little bit too much extra time on my hands. But that's how you measure stuff. I actually had a distributor, as I was filling my red Solo cup, use some colorful language and called me an idiot because it was a dehumidification with a particular piece of equipment problem. And they didn't understand what I was doing. And I said, well, all right, if you don't like the red Solo cup, let's go look at my 2 digital hygrometers and my app to show you that the humidity removal of this piece of equipment is definitely subpar. So this is the bubble way to measure latent removal, or you can do it with sophistication. I'm not a pinkies out kind of guy. I'm a red Solo cup kind of guy.
So, next one real quick question. Red Solo cup. So what happens if you don't have that much humidity in the air the day that you're doing the red Solo cup? It takes you longer than an hour to get that many BTUs.
You can weigh it. A half a pound would be 500 BTUs, but it's not that precise of a measurement. So what I'm going to do is stick to my digital hygrometers. I am going to stick my pinky out that day. So I was really fortunate. I alluded to this a little bit ago. I was measuring performance on equipment 25 years ago where the only thing that I was using to measure the performance of the equipment was 4 thermocouple type thermometer leads, 2 with cotton wicks on them, dunked in water, and 2 dry bulb ones, and I was plotting a psychrometric chart. The only thing I had that was even close to a computer was a solar-powered calculator, and I had my mag light in my mouth in the crawl space so I could power it up. But I know the CFM times change in enthalpy times 4.5, or if I want to be fancy, 4.45 to compensate for density. I can tell you all those formulas, the amps times volts divided by delta T times 3.16, because if you did it 800 times, it would be burned into your brain too. So it's not that I'm not smart, I'm really just good with repetition. So that's why I have to read things 3 times to understand it. Put things in perspective. I was the guy in 9th grade that was in remedial reading. And I don't know if I wear that proudly or not at this point in my life. It might make you suspect to what I'm telling you, but it's the truth. It's me. Nothing I can do about it, and do the best you can with what you got. Beer can cold if you're selecting it solely on tons. It's just the way it is. You guys get the difference between nominal numbers and actual numbers, right? Excuse me. 2 and 3 tons, based off of our model numbers. Do they really produce that? We see numbers like that are far more common. That's real life. It's what we can do. Are you guys familiar with that chart right there, or something that's akin to it? Right? If you're looking at extended performance data, that's what you're looking at. This is a piece of equipment, and I can't remember if this is 3 or 4 years old, or for all I know, this could be 20 years old. Does it matter? No. I was on the phone with a guy from DC the other day, and we were talking about some stuff with Manual T. You guys familiar with Manual T? It's the book for grills and registers. And he said, I want you to put some stuff together for that. And I'm like, ooh, is this virtual or live? He said, well, it's eventually going to be live. And I'm like, I got to get my leisure suit out, right? You get the reference? Manual T was written in 75, 76, something like that. Have the properties of air changed in the last 50 years? No. Properties of air, no. So that even though it looks very dated, well, when you look at spread and throw and terminal velocity of registers, it's the same, right? Nobody's reinvented the wheel when it comes to spreading or throwing air. So if I got to go to the thrift store, I am showing up for that in a leisure suit, because I thought that would be pretty cool.
What I think about, right off the top of my head, what I'm saying, you always want to see if it's per ton, and then 1480 different design, that's 350 or 300 CFM per ton.
And what the gentleman has said, and you're Chris's dad, correct? So I'm going to refer to you as Chris's dad. That's the way, when I was growing up, that's how we always did it. He was saying with different refrigerants, there were these 400 CFM per ton or 350. And specifically what you're quoting are rules of thumb. You can find this stuff like this extended performance data. I'm going to say this is for a piece of R22 equipment, if I remember correctly. So if I got any super geeks at home that can look at I believe this is Fetters or a York product, they can look at that and tell me how old it is. This is definitely a York-based product. I think it was from the Fetters line. But I can tell you that what your airflow per ton had absolutely nothing to do with the refrigerant in it. Now, you might have went to your local supplier and that's what they taught you, and I'm going to say don't trust anything they tell you for the rest of your life. No advice on finances, pregnancy, relationships, because they're not following the rules. These are the rules, period. This manufacturer is telling us what our capacity for this 030 and 024, this is a 2-ton system. I don't care if that's a nominal 2.5-ton coil. There's no such thing as a 2.5-ton coil. There's two pieces of equipment, when you put them together, make a predictable amount of capacity. And that capacity is manipulated based off of how many CFM we move across the evaporator coil. This is 4.25 per nominal ton. This is 400 CFM per nominal ton. This is 375 per nominal ton. What Manual S tells us is if you slow the fan down, your latent capacity is going to increase. Your total capacity is going to decrease. Your sensible capacity is going to decrease. And that's exactly what's going to happen. This is all with reference to our design conditions inside the house, 75 degrees and 50% relative humidity. We're going to use 85 degrees as our design temperature. You guys work in any markets where the design temperature is 85 degrees? I do. It's called the east end of Long Island, right? You guys have any idea who lives on the east end of Long Island? Uber rich people, people that are easy to cheese off, right? They want everything that they want. It's the house that you were describing earlier. So we have contractors that want to design at 100 degrees, even though that's not even close to what's required. And their heads explode when I tell them 85 degrees. It's just like the plumber from Queens that wants to design a boiler at -4, even though their design temperature is closer to 20 degrees. It's just so much fun. So enjoyable. So at this set of design conditions, right, 85 degrees outside, 850 total CFM. This is my total capacity of 23.4, sensible capacity of 19,000. We have 4,400 BTUs of latent. Most manufacturers give you total and sensible. You have to do some math to determine your latent. As you slow the blower down, total and sensible drop, our latent increases, and it happens again as we slow this down. This is math, this is physics, this is how air conditioners work. Doesn't matter if it's hotter outside or colder outside, this is the way it works. Slow the fan down, we get more latent out. We don't arbitrarily pick the lowest airflow because you're in Marathon. You don't arbitrarily pick the highest airflow because you're in Phoenix. You pick the piece of equipment that meets the sensible, meets the latent, doesn't exceed the total by 15%, 20%, or 30%. Single stage compressor, 2-stage compressor, VRV. By the end, I'm going to have everybody chanting that. Yes, sir.
So how do you relate the slide you just had with airflow according to sensible heat ratio?
We're going to get there. It's an excellent question. What the gentleman was asking, you look like a gentleman, so it's a compliment. He was asking, how does this stuff all work? We have to go through the whole process. Now, are you guys familiar with this mini-split stuff? I have a love-hate relationship with it, because when I was exposed to this stuff in the beginning, I had a whole bunch of people saying, put this stuff in and the humidity will take care of itself. I'm sticking up a finger right here to everybody that told me that, right? Because it's not true. My whole thing is, a salesperson can tell you something, okay, I believe it, but show me the math. I'm a math guy. That's the math, right? If you can prove it, it'll happen. If you can't show me the math, I don't believe you. And with this style of equipment, I'm going to say in its infancy in my market, they were trying to put in pieces of equipment that would heat and cool. And to do that, they oversized the crap out of it and you lived in a cave. And they had horrific failures with it. But they got up to speed, they monkeyed with some stuff, They put a compressor that they can run a lot faster, but they put a smaller capacity on it air conditioning wise, and they can prove the math and it does what it's supposed to, and it's a fabulous product. But they can show you the math now because they did what needed to be done. Their extended performance data gets so detailed, what components you use to build the system, and these are those little air handlers with a branch box and a piece of equipment outside. They're not only taking everything into account, like line set lengths and all that, to give you the capacity of it. They're the only manufacturer I know that publishes that. And it's a little number up there, and I'm going to circle it. And there's my, wow, this is impressive. A 62.5 degree wet bulb. Your manufacturer might publish all their stuff at a 63 degree wet bulb. The manufacturer I predominantly use uses a 62 degree wet bulb. 75 degrees at 50% relative humidity works out on a digital psychrometric chart to 62.5. Some manufacturers typically round down, some round up. Their jockeys are so tight, they go out to a tenth of a degree. Fantastic! You know, they get a big effort. I like looking at their extended performance data because they have the kind of detail that I think everybody should have. Now, I know guys that are actual application engineers, and they're like, I don't even know why we publish this. Nobody looks at us. You know, they're like the dentists. Their suicide rate's higher than anybody else because they're unloved. They're worse than, I made that up, and that's not a funny topic, but well, I'm from Jersey. It's the inappropriate in me always comes out. Let's talk about these guys. I have my own brand, right? That's Fred's. You got to understand sensible heat ratio. I've dropped that acronym a few times, or said SHR. 10,000 BTUs, we'll acknowledge that that comes in 10K potentially, right? I used to have a picture of a window unit, but this is the contemporary version of this slide. If it's operating at a 0.75 sensible heat ratio, if you have a unitary split, your favorite well, I guess down here they don't have 13 SEER. Your 14 or 15 SEER unitary split run at the magic 400 CFM per ton, it's going to have a sensible heat ratio on that extended performance data, 0.74, 0.75, 0.76, a couple of 3% in either direction. That's how they work. If it's operating, it being the 10K unit at a 0.75 sensible heat ratio, 7,500 BTUs of its capacity is going to drop temperature of the air. 2,500 BTUs is going to be wringing water out. Every hour I'm going to fill this up 2.5 times. See the way everybody can relate to that. Right? It's just math. Maybe math you're not used to doing, but it's just math. Manual S gives us guidance, and it tells us if we manipulate the airflow, we can change the sensible heat ratio. Just like we saw on that chart earlier, airflow goes up, total capacity goes up, latent goes down, efficiency goes up, and so does our sensible capacity. And as Chris's dad said, latent goes down. So one of the important things when we talk about that is sometimes people don't pay attention to the fact that efficiency is going down or efficiency is going up with the bigger airflow. So conversely, when the sensible heat ratio goes down, total capacity goes down, sensible capacity goes down, we do enjoy more latent removal, but our efficiency goes down. When somebody arbitrarily starts off the whole process at 350 per ton, they're waving those two individual fingers in the air and saying, I don't care about energy efficiency. So if you're in a wet market and you just design at 350 a ton, whether it's intentional or not, you're designing a system that is going to be less efficient. And if you don't care about efficiency, well, then that's fine. But if you do, let's follow the math, follow the process, and get those predictable results. We also have to remember that a house has a sensible heat ratio. For cooling, the leakier the house, the more water's in it, and we will benefit from that lower airflow. I look at things definitely different than Jenry's market, right? He lives in an area where you run heat, 6 hours a season? Maybe 3. So there's not a lot of heating going on. So the latent removal is probably his biggest concern. I have days, I have it on my app from this past summer. I was playing golf one day and I had an 84 degree dew point. That's disgusting. I mean, I was playing golf, so it didn't matter, but I was sweaty, a little uncomfortable. I would rather it not be that humid. So I know what it's like to deal with those conditions, and I might have to deal with it on 2 days, back to back, 10 times for a whole summer, but 75, 76, 77 degree dew points for 2 weeks straight is a thing that happens. It doesn't happen for 6 months, but it's something that does happen. So when we have a leaky house, we're going to have more water in it. So it might be more appropriate to have the lower airflow, but we're going to let the sensible heat ratio of the house dictate what our airflow is going to be. Then we're going to look at the extended performance data at those airflows, and this is the question that you asked, and we're eventually going to get there. We're going to look in Manual S itself. What's 10 plus 10 plus 2? There's 22 pages that are the standard in the book. Is there a lot of good information in the book? Yes. For you guys that live in heating climates, there's all kinds of guidance on economic balance points and just a lot of really good reference stuff. But if your main goal is being code compliant, there's 22 pages. And 2 of the pages you're never going to do, so it backs down to 20 pages, and I'm going to cherry pick like 4 of them. And if you want predictability following the standard, they're the only ones you need to look at. Do I recommend you read the book and investigate it in its entirety? Absolutely. There's a lot of knowledge to be gained from it. That's what the book looks like. It's intimidating. That's what the standard looks like, and I would like to think that it's not as intimidating. Right? There's not a lot to digest, and I do have enough time today to cover that. And while I'm saying that, time, I started at 8:30, right? How much more time do I have? Okay. So can you guys at 15-minute increments wave to me? Because actually, I'm doing pretty good. I'm 35 of 131. So, because I suck at this timing thing, right? I don't know. I'm bad at math, right? I've done classes where, and I can do whatever I want most of the time, which is going to kind of change for me a little bit, which I'm kind of saddened by, but at the same time, I've done classes where I have 100 slides that I want to use, and we're done, and I'm like slide 6. And I realized I talked about my family for an hour and a half. I hope they got their money's worth. I enjoyed myself, so, and I think is that the most important thing? Maybe, I don't know. Can you tell this is the first live class I've done in a while? In person, it feels good. It feels real good. Hope it feels good for you guys, too. Yeah. And I care more about me, but, it's just the way it, no, that's not true. I'll sob myself to sleep. What's that? Explanations? Yeah, it's things that this is things that if you're following code compliancy, they use specific words like shall, not a strong word. Must, strong word. Must. Right? To be within compliance of what the standard says, you must do this. Yeah, but there's some really solid guidance, or I'll call it advice, in the other sections. And, well, they call them the appendixes. So the A section, yeah. And I'm that weird dude that reads the appendixes of everything. So you guys go to the beach, go to the lake, go to the place where the kids play, and your wife does what she does, and either you sit in the bar and get hammered or you find entertainment. I can't read fiction. I can watch movies I can't read fiction. I literally take code books, this stuff, and I'm the guy sitting there reading the code book. So when somebody asks me a question and I'm saying 4.1.301 is you don't put screws longer than 1/8 of an inch in a dryer vent, there's something wrong with you. Yeah, but
You don't put no screws in drive thing. You gotta use foil tape. That's it.
not my market, because I said the exact same thing that you did, and somebody schooled me, showed me that update 18 mechanical code, you're supposed to put fasteners in there no more than 1/8 of an inch in length. Yeah, I'm with you until I write in the book, and what the book says is what the book says. So, in the end section, it basically tells us not to oversize stuff. It also tells us know how many BTUs your equipment can deliver. Where do we get the information that our equipment can deliver? That extended performance data. You see how easy this stuff really is? And I'm yelling, use the proper source. This is out of the original manual S, and I'm not going to read it verbatim, but it essentially says, don't use the AHRI information to select your equipment. Who's designing for 80-degree houses at 95 degrees outside? Nobody, right? So don't use the AHRI information. Use the expanded performance data from your manufacturer. There are just completely bizarre scenarios where there's a couple of manufacturers where it's very difficult to get the information for their equipment. What? But that exists. So you can use one of the ACA speed sheets and it will manipulate the numbers from the HRI conditions to simulate your set of conditions. Are you carrier guys? Okay. I don't know how. Carrier guys, you have the carriercomfort.com or whatever it is. You can put your equipment matches in and it spits out all the information. Some manufacturers do it that way. Some have. I've shamed the salespeople from my local distributors to provide their client base with Excel spreadsheets with all the information based off what they have in stock, which they hate me, right? But the worst part is all they do is contact the factory. The factory already has this stuff. And then that guy who's browbeaten in that little closet in the back says, hey, Ed, thanks. Somebody actually asked me for all this effort I put into making these spreadsheets. I'm going to learn how to make a spreadsheet someday. I know how to use them, kind of. I'm going to learn how to write one sometime. I know how to put a bunch of numbers and put quarry, whatever it is, and it tells me how many hours that I can bill. That's the only one I know how to do. It's the important one, though, right? This is the table that tells us how to select air conditioners. And I'm going to show you single speed, two speed, variable volume. What does it say? 115% of the calculated gain, 120% of the calculated gain, 130% of the calculated gain. What does this mean? Don't oversize by more than 15% single speed, 20% two speed, 30% variable volume. Is that the third or fourth time I said that today? Right? You don't have to memorize it, but they're the rules we follow. Do you predominantly put single stage equipment in or something else? Okay. Don't ever let the phrase, I oversized it by more than this, but it's okay because it's two-stage or variable volume, come out of your puss. It's not the way it works. You guys do a bunch of the variable stuff, right? Don't exceed that number. If you're going to exceed that number, you're putting yourself intentionally in the butt-kicking line. Or you got to go get ancillary dehumidification. That might be the strategy for your rich people's houses. But I'm going to try to avoid it if I can. It's the way it works, right? Heat pumps. Follow the same rules. With heat pumps, we have two classifications. We got condition A, that's a regular house. We have condition B, that's condition A, that's a normal sensible heat ratio in the house, something less than 0.9. Condition B is going to be a house that has a sensible heat ratio greater than 0.95. That is an expletive tight house. Being able to get a sensible heat ratio that high is, what's that? Yeah, it's Bill Spoon's house. Call him Spoon. He mispronounced my name in a video, and I'm just beyond livid about it. Because I have such an easy last name to pronounce, I don't understand why people do it. So I'm going to call him Spoon from now. So do I. I've known him for a long time. He's a good guy. But anyway, there are the few and far between houses that come out at 0.95. If you have a house that is super tight, that's what it is, and your heating degree days divided by your cooling degree days come out greater than 2. My market, it's 5 to 1. So Bill's market would be similar. You can oversize as much as 15,000 BTUs. Beyond that, it's a hard stop. Oversizing heat pumps is not recognized in the standard in Manual S. Is there guidance in the appendixes if you want to oversize and use ancillary dehumidification? Yeah. But there has to be something between the AHJ and the homeowner. And I've said AHJ, I think, a couple of times. Are you down or no idea? Authority having jurisdiction. right? That's code speak for the code official. So if the code official says, I have no idea what you're talking about, go ahead, you can do whatever you want. But if he's on point and saying, I want to see paperwork, I want to see documentation, that's what the guidance specifically says. We'll get to that. Right now, oversizing authority for heat pumps. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but it says you can do it if you meet all these requirements. And all those requirements are you got to prove that it's going to work. You have to give some advice on should you run the fan all the time, right? And I'm going to say that's going to be a hard no in your market unless you're conditioning. Yeah, but I'm more concerned about the fresh air you're bringing in. I want to be able to be sure that you're not adding humidity to the house when you do it. So you're going to get one of those makeup air units, put that condensing unit on it, and somebody's going to go on Facebook and say, look what that idiot installed. But they don't realize that you can add comfort cooling to makeup air. So that's bizarre. But there's a bunch of stuff. Yes, sir? Oh, excellent. And I'm going to say yes, sir, every time because that's just the way it is. So that means I have an hour or I have 45 minutes. I might actually run short of slides. I'm going faster than oh, no, I'm not. I'm not halfway there yet. Again, I don't want to go through this verbatim simply for the fact it's in the appendixes. It's not part of the standard. And if this is a strategy that you want to impart, if you can mathematically prove that it's going to work, it doesn't give me heartburn. But don't ever put yourself in the situation where you haven't talked or spoken to the code official who might bring the pain in the event he doesn't agree with you. Because code is code. And if you follow what the guidance in Manual S is, the oversizing and ancillary dehumidification, it's listed. It's not part of the standard. It's in the appendixes, and it has stipulations. And I can say that ACCA is actively involved in updating some stuff in Manual S, and I don't think the oversizing stuff is going to become part of the printed standard. It says if you're in a cold climate and your equipment has a latent load on it, in other words, you're in a heating-dominated climate, but yet you still have to get rid of moisture in the summertime, it's engineered dehumidifier should be part of the system, and we have to go through and mathematically prove what's taken place. It maxes out at 85% of your latent gain. Simple numbers, 10,000 BTUs is our total gain, 2,000 is latent. The house has a 0.8 sensible heat ratio. 85% of 2,000 is, I can't do that math, it's 850 times 2. So that would be the max size of our dehumidifier. I don't know why I had such a hard time converting dehumidification into real BTUs, but it's a pint is a pound. Dehumidifiers are rated in days per day, not per hour. So well, you do the math, it's a pint is a pound, so it's 60 pints per day. If it's 60 pounds, a pound is 1,000 BTUs. That would be what, 60,000 BTUs a day. So we would divide that, and that's how it all works out. That's how you quantify it. Yeah, something like that. So do the math. Document it. Essentially what they're looking out for is energy efficiency in this part. There's no reason to put the biggest dehumidifier in the house if it's not necessary. And I've played around with this over the years. I have a two-story house with a basement. I have a dry basement, but it still needs a little bit of dehumidification. For a couple of years there during the summer, for a week or three, I would take the dehumidifier from the basement and put it in my master bath, and it was kind of ghetto because it was just draining into the shower in my human car wash. But you could drop the RH upstairs easily by 5, and if the humidity's higher, it's easier to pull moisture out of the air. But if I was running mid 50% on low sensible gain, but high dew point type days, I could drop it 5, 6, 7 points by letting that thing run for 2 or 3 hours. So when you start doing the math behind this, oh, this is pretty cool. So then last year when I was here, I was listening to Nikki talk about the dehumidification. I'm like, oh, I'm going to buy one of those dehumidifiers. So when I got home last year, what did I buy? I went on Facebook Marketplace, and what's the best time of the year to buy a dehumidifier? In February, because I got one that was $300 at the Walmart, but I got it for $75. The people had only used it for a couple of months. They were moving. It's on my washer, and it drains into the washing machine drain. I have one of those houses where you go up the stairs, and there's a washer and dryer at the top of the steps. And I was supposed to move my washer and dryer from the basement up there when we finished our upstairs, but I can't read a tape measure, and I made the room too small, so we got a different washer and dryer for that room. So I brag, yeah, we got 2 washing machines and 2 dryers, but the truth is I can't read a tape measure. And oh, there was 2 of us. You want to hear some cursing? We were trying; they wouldn't fit. You lifted one up over and went like this, and I'm like, and he's like, you got to move it over. And it was only like this. You know when you look at a washing machine and the white side goes back and you hook your tape measure on it and you measure it? It's cool. Well, it sticks out like this much further. It ain't fitting. Oh, I was pissed. Got to remember who's standing up here, man. Here's the rationale. It's in the appendix. This is the way we sum it up. Performance modeling maximum. I can't read this stuff verbatim. The best part is the line. However, most practitioners are not positioned to undertake such evaluations. The marketplace will not absorb the cost of such efforts, and most code officials do not have the skill set, time, and I'm going to add inclination to check these calculations. If you can bust that stereotype, I'm proud of you. But there are going to be markets where you're going to get resistance to that stuff, and hopefully you can overcome it. I'm a big fan of all the performance modeling and all that kind of stuff, but you have to do it off of numbers. And if you're doing it off of numbers, cool. With everything with equipment design and selection and all that, don't make anything up. The math's got to work. Was that heavy? You want to talk about fans and all that kind of stuff? There's supposed to be a button there for me to push. But you guys didn't bring the video for me. So now everything's working. I'm very pleased. So essentially what they're saying in this one is we're going to get a ballpark to what our airflow is supposed to be. We're going to take that number and look at our performance data, and we're going to, everybody in unison, meet the sensible, meet the latent, not exceed the total by 15, 20, or 30%, depending on our compressor technology. Use a software program. Don't do this stuff by hand. If you like to torment your stuff, pencil, paper, calculator, you can do it, but use one of the software. Pick your favorite one. I like them all. It's good stuff. Program-based, that's browser-based. So there's plenty of information out about that. We're back to that predictability thing. I thought I looked through these slides enough that I pulled all the advertisements for the places where I was doing these and just grabbing slides from other decks, but apparently I missed that one. No rules of thumb, everything I keep saying over and over again. Let's do math. It leads to giving us predictable results. So here it is. We're actually going to start going through the process. I think I have too many of these in here, but who cares? This is the software program that I use, and I am so adamant about I could care less what program you use. I'm not even going to say what the name of it is. Elite software. And it is no different than any of the other ones. It gives us our sensible, our latent, and our total. And we need to know each one of those because, well, they're important. It also gives us that little ditty, and it tells us our sensible heat ratio. The sensible heat ratio of the structure puts us on the path to determining what our airflow is. And this is the area that I did. It was Long Branch, New Jersey, a 90-degree design temperature in the summertime. And what are our grains? It's only saying 30. So it's green grass. Not crazy humid, not arid. It's green grass. This is the equipment that we selected. Our design temperature for outside is 90 degrees. Where's 90 on this extended performance data? It doesn't exist, so we use a thing called interpolation, right? First time I was sitting right where you were, and somebody said that word, and I went, you made that up. And he didn't. The same day somebody used the word lubricity, and I said the same, you made that up, but apparently that was a real word too. I got a friend of mine from LA that I see periodically, and When I say LA, where am I talking about? Lower Alabama. And he'll walk up to me with that big wad of tobacco and he'll go, lubricity. So I'll see him here. Heck, he might even be watching right now. So cracks me up. I got to do this. I just realized that we are streaming. Hey, Tim Hardy, I'm doing this just for you. You're welcome. So I don't know if he's on, but if he'll get a shot to watch it. It's fun to do stuff like that, isn't it? Interpolation is nothing but taking the different design temperatures, putting them together. You add them together and divide by 2. And what was the word you actually said before? No, you used somebody said averaging or something like that. It is. That's what it is. But I think I sound sophisticated when I say interpolation, because that's what it says in the book. My interpolated values, these are my capacities at 85 and 95. Right from the chart, add them together, divide by 2. These are my interpolated capacities. This is me showing off that I can actually build little graphs and put them on a computer screen. That's it. You can use the IECC speed sheets. They'll do this for you. I'm using Carrier as an example. They let you manipulate your temperatures so you don't have to do this, and it's a printout on the screen or right in front of you. So some of the equipment manufacturers let you manipulate the stuff so you don't have to do this. But ultimately, if you're not in an 85 or a 95 or 105 degree design area, you have to interpolate the information. Here's another thing that kind of cracks me up, and I have to say this because when something pops into my head, if I don't share it, I can't move forward. I got ADD and stuff, and it won't let me speak. So if you're doing things like you live in a market where your design temperature is 93 degrees, and you're like, it's got to be hotter, I'm going to round it up to 95, right? Because you think you're going to get a little bit bigger of a unit. Manual J already did it for you. Manual J does everything with rounding. If the temperature's 90, it does your calc at 90. If your design temperature is 91, it does your calc at 90. If your design temperature is 92, it does it at 95. All of the coding inside the Manual J math is all done in 5-degree deltas. So it either rounds down 1 or rounds up 3. So if you're doing that thinking, hey, I just got a couple extra BTUs. No, you didn't. So when it comes, don't game any of this stuff. I got guys in my market that want to use 100 degrees because they don't feel comfortable with the equipment that is shown in Manual J. Manual J doesn't show equipment. We're supposed to take the sensible and the latent and use that to select our equipment. So if you follow the guidance in Manual S with the proper design temperatures from Manual J, you'll generally end up with more capacity than using Manual J as a standalone product. And the key to success is, yeah, you're right. Don't use Manual J as a standalone product. That's the way it works. So we have our interpolated capacities, and this is the way they look, at 1,000 CFM and at 1,200 CFM. And you're starting to get antsy, aren't you? You don't like where this is going. You're like, there's something missing. That's your question, right? Hold up, right? What's my airflow? Manual S gives us the guidance. And specifically what it's going to tell us, and we're not there yet, this is out of another book, and it essentially is telling us don't arbitrarily pick 350, 400, or 350. The sensible heat ratio of the house dictates where we're supposed to be. And this is actually, I know it's not out of Manual S because it's not a picture with my phone. This is, I think, out of Manual D. Because when you're out of the standard and you're reading the appendixes and the other good information, this is the type of stuff that he drops in those other areas. But this is the actual process for Manual S. To estimate your cooling CFM, and this is actually out of the old Manual S. The process is the same. It's called something a little bit different, but I'll show you all that. Determine the sensible heat ratio of the structure. Total cooling load into the sensible cooling load. Gives us our sensible heat ratio. We do the math, we see 0.88. We saw that on our load calc with the computer before. This is just the manual process to get there. There's this cool little chart in Manual S, and it tells us what our temperature difference should be based off the sensible heat ratio of the house. We're going to take that, put it into the formula. CFM is solved by taking your sensible BTUs. And I can't say this enough. Everything that has to do with duct design and airflow has to do with sensible BTUs. The latent BTUs get taken care of at the coil. So if you're doing total capacity in 400 CFM per ton, you might actually be moving more air than following the guidance in Manual S. So you're overly concerned about moisture removal, and you're pumping more air through the system. I got a little excited there, didn't I? Right? So I'm on your side, and I get a lot of push. Oh, you can't have big airflow like that. It's got to be lower. Well, if you're doing it on total capacity, you're pumping more air through that evaporator coil than I am. And I'm telling you, you're number one as I'm walking backwards. 17 degrees is our design delta, which is going to produce a lower sensible heat ratio with our equipment. So it does some math, and it tells us we need 1,200 CFM. They don't expect us to hit that number on the money. Plus or minus 15% is realistic. Now we go to the, now I want to say, now we go to the videotape. Right? Now we go to the extended performance data, and we look in that 1,200 CFM column. Because we're going to be between those numbers. Theoretically, we could drop down a little bit and look in the 1,000 CFM column if we so choose to. And I love this one, right? It's 2.5 ton system, 1,200 CFM. And in your head, you're probably going, that doesn't make any sense, because you've been using rules of thumb all your life. Or you're looking at that and saying, well, yeah, that's what my software tells me to do. I never understood it, but I do now. Thanks, Ed. You know, this is the math, the proper way to do it. And I'm looking at a couple of guys in here right now that have jackets on. And I got to tell you, you're making me sweat. I'm jealous. Well, I think it has. I didn't pace today. I had a thing for a long. I used to pace. I don't pace anymore. But I think that's because I've been sitting doing the classes. 45 or 30 is what I got. It's rounded off the 1.08. Yeah. It's the 0.24, which is the specific heat of air times. Instead of me going through the math, whenever we do anything in CFM, what does, and I'm going to put you on the spot, right? What does, no. You ready? Now really listen to me. What does a pound of air weigh? I'm a douchebag, aren't I? Listen to me. What does a pound of air weigh? What? 1 pound. A pound of air weighs a pound. I'm sorry. I have this whole thing. I'll never ask a question of anybody to solicit an incorrect answer except for that. Because I don't care who you are. That's clean. That's funny. That is always going to be a touchdown every time. Oh, I know. I ask that, and 9 out of 10 times nobody can answer it correctly, right? So a pound of air weighs a pound. If we heat a pound of air up, what does it do? It's specific density stuff is what I'm talking about. So what does the density change when we heat up air? It gets bigger and it rises, but does it still weigh a pound? Yes, right. So if we chill it and it gets smaller, does it still weigh a pound? Right. When we do CFM, if you heat up a CFM, is it still a CFM? No. It gets bigger, right? We're changing the density. So it gets bigger. It still weighs the same. It's not the same size, right? So when we use that 1.08 multiplier in any CFM formula, we're compensating for the density. Well, that's part of it too, but that's a different part of the calculation. The 1.08 comes from standard air, which is 68 point something, but 70 degree air at sea level at no humidity, right? And that's when it weighs 0.075. That's a cubic foot of air at 0.075. That's a number you were thinking of when I was asking about a pound. We're compensating for size with weight because weight doesn't change when we heat it or cool it. Size changes when we heat it or cool it. So it's 1.08, and Hank, when he wrote this stuff, just rounded the 1.08 to 1.1. Make sense? Good. Am I at 30 or 45? I need your answer first. 45, okay, I'm fine. So that's the way it worked. 400 CFM for a 2.5 ton system. If you're questioning that, and I'm going to completely say yes, because that's just the way it is. When we actually do the math, and you're going to see as we move forward why. Now, if you're saying this stuff, the stuff being this is actually from the original Manual S. And you want to say, well, that's what it looks like in the current Manual S, because it does. And they even call it ballpark cooling CFM, because the whole process is just to figure out where our airflow should be, but the decider is the extended performance data, and we're going to walk you through that whole process. These numbers have changed by a degree. I did the math again for this example, and it still comes out the same. It's not enough to knock it down. This is what you were asking about or mentioning about with your altitude correction factor. Our CFM is equal to our sensible, and I'm going to keep saying sensible because I just can't emphasize it enough. Not total, it's our sensible BTUs divided by 1.1 times our altitude correction factor, which is not a thing here, and our temperature difference. So that 1.1 is a rounding up of 1.08. And it really, if you really want to get into the specifics, it's going to be 1.06 or 1.07. 70 degrees, 30% relative humidity is correcting 1.08, corrects to 1.07. 75 degrees at 50% relative humidity corrects to 1.06. But it's not going to make enough of a difference in this calculation because the columns that we have to choose from is 1,000, 1,214. So it's, yes. We don't want to get into that kind of minutia if it's not going to change our outcome. And actually, I'm tasked with, I want to ask Hank, but I'm afraid to ask him a question. Because if you ask Hank a question, he yells at you, even if it's a good question. True story, yes.
I believe Doug's asking, he's in South Carolina, and he's got sensible heat ratios of 0.8 or higher. I think he's asking if he does manual P now?
Manual P is about psychrometrics, and if you follow the process in, the question is, Doug? Yes. Doug, in Carolina. They're the same, it doesn't matter. I know Pedro tries to tell me something different, anybody who's driven 95 down those, but yeah, stop in and see Pedro. You got to wear golf shoes or spikes when you go in the bathrooms there. For whatever reason, they haven't figured out how to get rid of too much floor water in that place. And I've been there a bunch. That's where I buy my fireworks, pay too much, but I got the south of the border stickers all over my basement. I'm very fond of the place. Anyway, and he's going, why would you even stop there? To answer your question, if you're using manual P to start figuring out sensible heat ratio, and I think generally what people are trying to figure out is branch run requirements, hang out with me after lunch, and I'm going to go through where you actually do that math. So I'm not going to disagree if your sensible heat ratios are what your sensible heat ratios are. What I'm used to seeing is sensible heat ratios that are below 0.8 or above 0.85. That's kind of a weird place to be between 0.8 and 0.85, but it could be, and it's the exception, not the rule. The rule is your target airflow is more than 400 CFM per ton, or your target airflow is less than 400 CFM per ton. But if your target airflow to start the search is 400 CFM per ton, it's because your load calc came out with a sensible heat ratio between 0.8 and 0.85. And I know when I start talking about this stuff, a lot of people, their eyes just glaze over. You don't need to memorize anything that I just said. You just need to follow the guidance and it'll take you to the right place. So your load calc will give you your sensible heat ratio, and you're going to use the guidance in these charts to solve for your CFM. Once you solve for your CFM, you're going to go to the appropriate place to get your airflow and your capacity. We're going to go through this process 2 or 3 times before the conclusion. Everything else was setting the foundation of the fundamentals, I guess is a good way to put it. So this is our total capacity. What was the rule with Manual S for oversizing? 15%, single stage, yep, 15, 20, and 30%. We're putting a single stage in this house because that's all they can afford. We don't want to oversize this by more than 15%. You just multiply it by 1.15. That gives us our ceiling. So we don't want to pick a piece of equipment that's bigger than 30K. We got to find a piece of equipment that makes this many sensible, this many latent, and we don't want it to be over 30,000 BTUs in total capacity. That's not hard, right? We're just not going to say I want a 2-ton unit, though, or a 3-ton unit, or a 2.5-ton unit. We're going to meet those specific targets. Ooh, somebody's over there. Take another one. I want to get in there good for it. Get a hold of me later. I'll give you the whole slide deck. This is our requirement. This is our capacities. Our capacities are listed at 2 different airflows. Could it work out that it does fall at 400 CFM per ton based off of sensible BTUs? Yeah. I got to look at the minutia of the numbers. But I think we might find out 1200 is better. Let's see what happens. This is our house's gains. This is our equipment's capacity. And I literally put those little pictures so that you can visualize which numbers belong to which. That's our total gain. Does our equipment have enough total capacity? 27K is bigger than 26. We're golden, right? Next in line is our sensible gain. We need 23,000. We have 21,000. No bueno. Agreed? Do we have enough latent removal? This is our capacity. This is our gain. We got plenty of latent. We're short on sensible. The guidance in Manual S, and if this is the biggest takeaway from today's class, it should be. The guidance in Manual S tells us that we're supposed to take half, not all, but half of our excess latent capacity, apply it to the sensible, and in a lot of instances, we'll end up with enough capacities to make everything work. If we don't, then we're going to have to do something else. But in this instance, again, we're at the 1,000 CFM. We don't have enough sensible capacity. So there's our latent capacity. That's our latent gain. We deduct the little from the big. We got 2522 of excess. The rule is we take half of that and apply it to our sensible. So we got 1,261 BTUs that we can apply to our 21.4, and the math shows us that we come up a little bit short. We're covering 90% of it, not 100% of it. If I was Genry, I would put that piece of equipment in, I'm done, because he's more concerned about that latent removal. I'm a little bit, let's see what happens at 1,200 CFM. So at 1,200 CFM, I have enough total BTUs, I have enough sensible BTUs now, and I have enough latent BTUs. So I'm good. So Genry and I are going to meet in the middle. He's going to pick a piece of equipment that delivers 1,200 CFM, and I'm going to give him a thermostat that when the humidity is high in the house, it runs at 1,000, and we get the best of both worlds. So when there isn't a high latent load in the house, we're going to run at the higher efficiency with I embrace, and then when it's humid in the house, he's going to get the airflow that's going to deliver the capacity that can pull more water out of the house. Is that a happy medium? And that's doing it on the cheap. We're still single stage. For you guys that are VRV all the way, it's already taken care of itself.
So how you do that? You said a single stage?
Yeah.
You gonna put a thermostat to slow the fan speed down?
Yeah. You can use strategies like that, but I don't know if the equipment that I have in my house is really that unique. I have Ecobee thermostats. I have a Florida heat pump in my basement, and it's got a resistor on the board. If I clip it, I can use a humidistat that makes and breaks, and it's either a 5, 15, or 20% increase or decrease in fan speed that it reacts to. So I'm doing this currently in my own house. And that piece of equipment's 10.
But when you get down to the degree, you say you can get this. You got a humidistat that's taking off, so you run off humidity besides to.
Well, first and foremost, we're going based on sensible temperature. If the humidity's high, it runs at a lower fan speed. So theoretically, could we satisfy the thermostat and there's no demand for humidity? I can not game it, but I can take advantage of some of the properties that that thermostat offers. Like I can have 2 degrees of droop. Yeah. We can talk about that in more depth. I want to get through the content. All right. You guys get what we were just trying to do right there? It's pretty simple. I'm not coming up with any kind of far out strategy. I'm showing you something that you most likely have available to you now. This is a poor man's, or that's not the way to put it. This is a budget system that still kicks butt. It checks a lot of boxes. I like that phrase. Yeah. So we got the guy coming up saying, yeah, boy, that's the one that we wanted. I'm like, Yeah. We can't show that to the camera. So yeah, we picked a piece of equipment that meets everything. We want better dehumidification. We can go with that strategy that is talked about. Use facts and rejects rule of thumb. Right? There's no reason to be using rules of thumb when all this information is readily available to us. I think that's a pretty simple way to look at it. Henry's house. That's the guy that lives down the street from me. Right? That's what my neighborhood looks like. Yeah? Henry's house is sort of leaky, and it's got a 2.5 ton unit in it, running at 800 CFM. Right? 2.5 tons, 800 CFM. Does that make sense to you? But that's the way Henry's house works out. But since I'm in Florida, I decided to bring Henry's house to Florida, and that's what it looks like when it's down here. Right? That's 4th grade, baby. I'm up to 4th grade with my PowerPoint skills. So let's go through the process. He needs 18.5 for sensible BTUs. He needs 5,800 for latent BTUs, 24,000 BTUs total. Right? What kind of sensible heat ratio does Henry's house have? It's a low number, isn't it? I don't expect you to do the math. Hell, he doesn't even know a pound of air weighs a pound. I don't expect him to be able to do that kind of math. There are 3 numbers. Let's run it through the process. 15? Oh, I can slow down, baby. Oh, if I got that kind of time to burn, excuse me. I might go get a donut, you know. Can I use your hat and see if we can get a collection going or something? I think I'm doing pretty good today. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you, though. I think you guys get my bad dad humor. I don't know. Like I said, I'm taking I am staring into a screen, and I get very little. I get a few pity laughs from the people that host the stuff that I'm doing, but I think I got a couple of genuine yucks. So I don't know if my head's going to fit through the door when I go down this. My belly doesn't sometimes, but my head might not fit. This is a good time. Hey, Jenny, can I ask a question or a favor of you? Take a couple pictures and text them to me. I want to send them to my kid. She doesn't believe that I do this in person, but I definitely do. Thanks, man. We have this whole thing going forever about, I've told her I'm nationally known, and she just rolls her eyes. But every once in a while, something comes out in print, and I'm like, that's a national magazine. And it's not. It's the local HVA Insider. It's that little newspaper thing. And I'm saying, look, Dad's in there. And my sister bought me this plaque that said something about, what my job title was. And at the bottom it says nationally known. She'll get in, a twist about something. I'll just pick that thing up and start following her around the house. Well, the platform that I do most of my stuff on, I don't see them at all. It's GoToWebinar, and it's the only face is mine. And obviously, if you look like me, you want to put it over on that screen so you can't see yourself. Because either I get, mesmerized in the beauty, or I'm offended by, I'll stick with the first one. All right, Henry's house. Let's figure out what his airflow is going to be based off of a sensible heat ratio. Henry, how often do you come up with sensible heat ratios that are numbers like that? Okay. Do you find a lot of them are over 0.85?
Yes. I'm normally in the between 0.85 and 0.82, 0.84.
Yeah, so you hit those numbers that I don't see frequently.
Right, but how go with your numbers and how all these factors you find the tools.
Yep, you're confident in your results. And if you look at what Manual J says, it says right there in an existing house, you should use every method at your disposal with regards to building science. That's one of the specific paragraphs right in section. Damn, I bragged about I go to the beach and read this at section 2. I'm going to say it and stick to it, and I'm not sure. It's sections 1 or 2. 0.75, when we divide our total BTUs into our sensible BTUs, that's what we end up with. So we got 0.75 as our sensible heat ratio. We go to the chart. The chart tells us if we're below 0.8, our temperature difference is supposed to be 21. So that's going to give us a colder coil, better dehumidification. We plug the math in. It is a 24,300 something gain. We know we're not going to get that kind of capacity out of a 2-ton unit, so we're definitely going to be looking at at least a 2.5 for this 24,000 BTU gain to get enough capacity. 800 CFM for a 2.5-ton unit. And I purposely use this in these classes where I have 1,200 for 2.5 tons, and now I have 800 as our target, because our airflow it has nothing to do with the manufacturer, it has nothing to do with the guy at the supply house, it has everything to do with the sensible heat ratio of the structure, which is what gives us our guidance for our airflow. Plus or minus 15%, we're going to easily be able to find 800 on the extended performance data and 1,000, and we're going to look at both of those. I said it before, this is the updated version out of Manual S. The way you identify whether I have a PDF copy of the manual is whether it looks like I took a picture of it with my phone, because I took a picture of it with my phone. Every time I ask Wes for a PDF copy of it, he says, you're breaking up, and someday I'll get access to all them things on PDF. Manual S says, look through your extended performance data, find a piece of equipment that meets the requirements. Meet the sensible, meet the latent, don't exceed your total by more than 15, 20, or 30%. I like this. Thanks, guys. They're the numbers that we have to make sure that we're taking into account. We don't want to go over it by 15%, so we do the multiplication of 1.15. Again, we have a customer that only wants to buy single-stage equipment. That's, well, let's do a real scenario. Their credit was not quite 600, and they qualified for the smaller amount, not the bigger amount. I don't know. So we looked at a nominal 2-ton piece of equipment, an 030 inside coil, 024 outside. It's a 2-ton system at 800 CFM, and I just arbitrarily picked 95 degrees outside, and we're looking at a 21,800 BTU total capacity, 18,200 BTUs of sensible, and I see 18.2 is not enough to cover 18.4, and I got a whopper of a latent load on this house. And when I do some math, I see I only got 36,000 BTUs of latent capacity. So obviously 2 tons isn't going to do it. So then, yes, sir?
Kind of a random question, Ed, but what's an SHR? Like, no, I know that.
Sensible heat ratio.
If you have an SHR on a house that's drastic, when do you stop and say, whoa, you got to fix the house? Like 0.75 and below, 0.70 and below? Like, when should you draw the line and say, I ain't touching this house until it gets...
The question is, when do you say, let's spend money elsewhere based off of having a house with a low sensible heat ratio? I've worked in a wide variety of houses. And I'm glad you asked this question, because this lets me tell a little story about something I'd like to address. I've worked in houses where over 10 million, right? And I like working in regular people's houses that have enough money to buy good stuff, right? I learned a long time ago, when you walk up the driveway and there's a bunch of fancy cars, there's as good a chance that they don't have a good credit score. And 2 10-year-old cars in a modest house, whether it's well kept or not is not really that much of a deciding factor, but they're usually getting their checkbook out to make payment. When you run their credit score, it's always over 700, right? So you can't go by that. But I've also worked in houses where I was working for the county resource program, and I was doing blower door testing and load calculations and CAS testing in low-income houses. So I'm familiar with the world of, you're in a house, you got to go in the basement to look at the mechanicals. You do not take a step forward after you open the door until you shine a flashlight down the stairs to make sure they're there. Because if you're in an old enough house that has fireplaces and they're cold, if you see trim missing, solid chance there's no basement stairs. So you got to pay attention. I'm not, and I want to, because at that time I was getting at least 75, if not a full hundo for a blower door test. If I'm missing panes of glass, I'm not doing a blower door test. We got to replace the missing stuff, because that's a house that if they had air conditioning would have a sensible heat ratio, maybe approaching 0.5. So that's a way I've seen a big gambit. And it depends on how much money the people want to spend and what they're really trying to achieve. Because if I start talking about things like sensible heat ratio, which I'm probably not going to, but if I start talking about relative humidity and they're engaged in that conversation, they might address it. And I would much prefer to do something to the house, even if it's another contractor doing it, not the HVAC work, but doing the air sealing and the additional insulation and all that. It's just going to make my job with supplying the comfort, and you know that part, it's going to make it easier. So do I have a defined time when I'm going to do a hard stop? And yeah, I'm going to say if the house has a sensible heat ratio below like 0.7 or like 0.65, I'm going to say, I want to sell you this job. I hope I have come across as the person you want to do business with. And I don't say this to them. I want your money. But it's in your best interest to maybe start spending some money elsewhere. I can make up for it. I'm still going to want to put a properly sized air conditioner in and offer them ancillary dehumidification. But that $2,500 or $3,500 bucks I'm going to charge them for the they're better off on air sealing. And my housing stock, if it's that egregious though, is a house that's in really rough shape, and I'm probably not in there selling them something anyway. Something's got to be really weird going on. You're missing ceilings, you're missing... Yeah. Those people usually, my experience with those houses, and we have them in my market, those people usually have the money. Because if they don't, they just got window units throughout, and that's what it's always going to stay. I don't want to talk to those people. I also have a different set of circumstances that I predominantly deal with, and I'm a 3-3-6 market. 3 months of nothing, 3 months of air conditioning, 6 months of heat. So the damage isn't that long lasting over the 3 months. It's when you're in a market, you're probably 6 months of cooling, 7 months of cooling. 9 months of cooling. So it's a little bit different. All right, we can talk about that if we have some more time at the end. We're at Henry's house. The manufacturer published some extended performance data where that 1050 is pretty close to my 920. Not exact, but we got to go with what is available from the manufacturer. Total gain, sensible gain, latent gain. I got enough total capacity. I got enough sensible capacity. I'm short on latent capacity. Right? Henry's house is a wet house, especially after we put those palm trees around it. But that's actually a sensible heat ratio in my area. It's a leaky house. We're woefully short on the latent. We know if we slow the fan speed down, we'll increase our latent. So we do it exactly that. We're running it at the lower airflow. My total capacity has dropped slightly. My sensible capacity has dropped slightly. And we see that I still have enough total capacity. I still have enough sensible capacity, but I don't have enough latent capacity to get the moisture out. So what do? Do I automatically jump to the next size piece of equipment? No, I'm somewhat familiar with this manufacturer, and I know that if I go from an A coil to an N coil, I'm going to get a big jump in pressure drop across my coil, but I know I got enough fan in Henry's furnace that I can overcome another 1/10 or another 0.15 inches of drop, and I can get more latent removal from that N coil. And this isn't specific to this example. You might have stuff that differs from your manufacturer. You got to look it up. Don't say an N coil does better latent, punch in the neck, right? Because it's not necessarily a fact. Look it up. I can't emphasize that. And careful with the neck punches. I'm a short guy, so it's coming up this way. So we got our total capacity at 1,000 CFM at our proper conditions, our 62-degree wet bulb. We're near our airflow target, and I got enough total, I got enough sensible, and I got enough latent. So if your sole purpose is economy, We checked all the boxes. If you're a little bit more concerned with latent removal, let's slow the fan down and see if it works out at our proper indoor conditions, at our exact airflow target that S told us. What did we end up with? Well, we ended up with enough total capacity to meet our total gain. Our sensible capacity is close. We're not quite there. But if we look at that latent capacity, we got gobs, right? So we can deduct our latent capacity from our latent gain. I said that backwards. Deduct our latent gain from our latent capacity. We got 1,400 of excess. Half of that is 711. 711 plus the 18.4 from here gives us 19,111, and that covers the 18.5 that we needed right there. Checked all the boxes. Maybe this is a replacement and our ductwork is a little bit questionable. It's not quite big enough. I would rather have a little bit higher velocity at 800 than a lot higher velocity at my 1200 or my 1000 or wherever it worked out. So there's choices. How much we got? 15? I think I might actually finish. Nah, ain't even close. So you know what I'm going to do? I want to show this one. So I will show it. This is the abridged edition. Don't use the abridged edition, right? Use a full version. But the best version to teach this stuff is the abridged, because then I don't have to play favorites with one manufacturer. If I do it correctly, or what I think is correctly, I got to use 6 different software programs, and I actually know how to use most of them because they all come from the same stuff. But for me, it's just easier to use the book, so to speak, and then I'm not playing favorites or whatever. So this gain, and if you get a calculator out real quick and add all that up, I made all this up. Right? The only numbers I cared about were these two. But these are real life. This was a class that I did for Mitsubishi not that long ago. So my heat gain was 2.5 tons. Oh, did I just do it? No, I'm going to break it down into sensible and latent. And that's my heating requirement. Oh, and we did my numbers. The sensible heat ratio on this place is 0.9. But because of the way this manufacturer publishes its extended performance data, I'm not even going to bother going through the whole what's my airflow process, because I'm going to find out that when I use that guy with a branch box and a couple of them skinny air handlers, I tell it my line set lengths and all that, it pumps out all the information that I'm interested in. And as long as I can make that original capacity calculation come out where I need to be, I can skip some of that other process. Now, if I don't have enough sensible or enough latent, I can go back and manipulate stuff if I need to. But ultimately, what I have to pay attention to is when I put my information in here, I use the correct information. And again, it takes into account the line set lengths and all that kind of stuff. We have this unit delivering at a sensible heat ratio around 0.88. And what it specifically looks like is I have 13K of sensible, 15K of total, and then there's going to be some math later that shows us what our latent is, because we always have to solve for what our latent capacity is. These are the numbers, and this is the mind-numbing stuff. I'm going through this really too fast for you really to digest it, but I'm not trying to teach it now. I'm just kind of giving you an overview of how some manufacturers will present you with this data. My total was my total gain from my calc was 2.5 tons. 35,000 BTUs is my limit. Again, we're still sticking with single stage equipment. If you saw that picture before and you know that it's something else, I believe you. I don't know this equipment off the top of my head, but follow the math here that we're doing. I got 27.4 for sensible, 3,000 for latent. My loss is 47,000 BTUs. After we do a bunch of this, we match up all of our equipment. My total capacity is 31 and change. If my gain is 30 and change, obviously 31 is greater than 30, so I have enough total capacity. My sensible capacity exceeds my sensible gain. My latent gain was 3,050. My latent capacity was 3,500. We checked all the boxes like we did before. So all the way down, we met the sensible, we met the latent, and we didn't exceed our total by 15%. I'm well within my 15% manual S limit. So what about the heating side of things? I need 47K in heat. The equipment only delivers 35. Do those thin air handlers give me the ability to put electric resistance in them? No. So what am I going to do? And I want an answer to this one because I can finally get one because I got real people in front of me. I can't. I already bought this. We don't have enough heat. So where am I going to grab some more BTUs? That's not a bad idea. No, it's not going to give me that much more heat. So what am I going to do? Oh, what the? No, it's where's the heat? Where am I going to get the? I'm going to put one of these in too. And I'm going to locate it maybe within 18 inches of the return of one of those pancake, I call them pancake units. I don't even know if that's right. One of them thin ones. I'm going to put this guy in here. And how many BTUs of heat does it make? It makes 11K. How short was I? About 11K. Because that's how many BTUs. The 4711 is what I need. If I add my thin air handler with that consult unit, I have greater than that. So I was able to, there's my loss, there's my capacity. On 99% of the days in the winter, statistically, I'm going to have enough heat to heat that house. Is that a good strategy? I mean, it's an extra $6,000, but if somebody wants to be all electric, and in my market, you got another $1,500 rebate, that sweetens the pot. You put 3 of those machines in, you're getting $4,500 in incentives. So that $287,000 job was just for $4,500 cheaper. You caught what I did there, right?
So instead of going up in selection to be above your 15%, you got to do it that way so you go ahead and stay.
Yeah.
Get more heat.
A real precise recap of what this gentleman just said is we put more heat pump capacity in instead of making the other 2 pieces of equipment larger, because then we would have been oversized for cooling. You're absolutely, more than 15%, you're absolutely right. What happened 7 years ago was the manufacturers were saying, just put a bigger unit in. And they turned every one of those houses into a cave because they didn't dehumidify properly. Now, do they have some pieces of equipment now? Somebody said hyperheat, where you might have a compressor that can make 18,000 BTUs of heating, but it's rated at a 9,000 in cooling. That's the way they solved all these problems. And it's genius. What Manual S's goal is to make you guys prove mathematically that it'll do what it'll do. If you have to prove it, then you have to look in the extended performance data. The manufacturer has to prove it. And if the manufacturer can prove it, you can make it happen in reality. What happened far too frequently was somebody who doesn't really understand the process, who's good at sales, they befriended you and said it's going to work. And now you're left holding the bag. All right, I'm going to cut you off because I don't have, do I have 10? 7? All right, I'm not going to do these. There's some more examples in here. And this example is nothing more than, I did one that's a real air handler, and I need twice the heat. I am going to show you a picture of it. You can put electric resistance heaters in those. So in some applications, I'm going to have double and half. So I'm never going to get even close to enough heat pump. And I like electric resistance heat because it can be your buddy. Part 2, I am going to go through the duct side of things. If you want to, if you like this, well, actually, I'm real curious, and I am going to burn a minute on this. Who has seen me speak before? Oh, I got a bunch of repeat offenders. Cool. The next one's going to be just as goofy, but I have dirty pictures if you want to come for that one. So, I kind of do. But this is it. It's sort of the same content, a very accelerated version of the friction rate worksheet and why our duct systems come out good sometimes and sometimes they don't. This is the equipment that we're going to use in that example, and I'm just going to have to make you wait until this afternoon to see it because I want to get into the heating side of Manual S. And if you are with a furnace just setting it on low speed, the way I was taught to set up furnaces for airflow was heat always goes on the red wire, right? He's laughing. You know exactly what I mean. Depending on how much you oversize the furnace, because I know you oversize the crap out of the furnace, you might need more airflow for heat if you follow the guidance in Manual S or the manufacturer's installation instructions. You might need more airflow for heating than you do cooling, but that's not how they're typically set up. Manual S essentially just tells you to look at the data plate inside the furnace and take the two numbers, add them together, divide by 2. That would be data plate information. In this example, it's 25 to 55. That furnace will function properly as long as the temperature rise stays between those two numbers. But if we take those two numbers and add them together and divide by 2, that's the target we want to design for, and whoop, that is the math to solve for it. It's output BTUs divided by the product of 1.1 times your target delta T tells us what our target airflow is. So if you oversize the furnace by 2, this number is going to be substantially higher, right? So this is the process. This is a starting point. Once you start off with this, if you want to do your combustion analyzer and follow measure quick, you can fine-tune that airflow, but this is the starting point. You can pick what fan speed you're going to need based off of this information, and that's somebody else is doing how to read static pressure, and I'm not going to spend any time on that. I'm going to look in Manual D where it says 0.5 isn't always the answer. Sometimes it's 0.6 or 0.7 or even higher. I have stood up in technical committee meetings and yelled at people who wanted to tell me I had to stay with that number. I am vindicated. I am vindicated because that's out of a modern furnace. That 0.5 crap is gone, right? Where are we at? They're saying I can run all the way up to 1 inch because that ECM motor is programmed to do that. Look at that. And on top of it, they're regurgitating exactly what Manual S recommended 25 years ago in their installation instructions. If I could meet that guy, I would hug him, right? They're catching up. All this stuff they tell us to do. All right, real life, inside of a furnace, 35 to 65. The manufacturer gives us some info so we can adjust stuff if necessary. Hey, look, I learned how to take a selfie, right? But do the math. My target's 50. What in real life was my actual reading? Practice what you preach. It's my sister's house. I put that furnace in originally 31 years ago. Fast forward, that was the first furnace I ever replaced that I originally installed. All right, we don't have time for this, but the ACA Design Series consists of a book that talks about equipment, a book that does the math, and that's not me, but I would rather stick a rusty fishhook in my eye than ever do a load calculation again by hand. I always try and get them to scheduling. I requested it this. I'm the last thing you see before you go eat, but it didn't work out that way. Use software. I don't care what software you use it. That's a pretty cool thing. If you haven't messed around with that, I think generally you'll give us a thumbs up on that one. Manual S is what we talked about today. I hope you got something out of it. But essentially, it's what coil to pick, how much air, what unit to pick. Remnants is Sandy. Both of those machines were still filled with refrigerant. Guidance on airflow and oversizing limits with our furnaces gives us direction in boilers. That literally is my basement. Manual D will give us guidance on duct sizing, and I'm going to save that for a later date. Manual T talks about terminations. There is way more about terminations than aesthetics. Number 1, don't blow air on people. Number 2, use an actual strategy when you select those things. I don't know why that's in there other than to say I didn't have that happen this year, and I'm pissed. It's my kid. Returns, put them down low if the equipment's down low. Put them up high if they're in the attic. The number 1 things with returns, 1 turn minimum, 2 is better. Don't ever look through the hole and see the fan. If you look through and see the fan, it's going to be loud. Residential commissioning. Check after you install it. That's about how I feel right now. One more thing, and I'll get you. If you have questions, I'll be at the TEC booth tomorrow and throughout the day. And if you want to get a hold of me, I got a little bit of a surprise. That's my new email address in 2 weeks. But you can get a hold of me there. That's me and my gang. We play golf every day. So with that, what's your question, Jeremy? Oh, Bob's House? Yeah, Bob's House is a book that walks you through the whole residential design series. Wes Davis was responsible for putting most of it together, and he's a character because, you know, when he talks about what furnace to pick, he's like, give him the heater, Bernie, you know, that kind of a thing. He walks you through the process of doing a load calc, but not, well, he does a block load, but then it just addresses the master suite. And he walks you through the whole residential process. I've been tasked with, and I hope to start doing this in person in maybe November or December, a 3-day class. You learn how to do manual J, you learn how to do manual S, you learn how to use manual D and manual T. And instead of trying to squish it into 2 hours, or we had an hour and 45 minutes today, or whatever it was, we try and do it in 3 days. So if you're interested about that, come talk to me. But no, that's an excellent point, Henry. Yeah, it's 1 day at the beach with no alcohol, 2 days at the beach with it, maybe 3 with, you know, a 12-pack each day. But yeah, it's a read, and it's written not just in a technical way, it's in a pretty good way. And one thing that I want to do before I get done, because my daughter never believes that I do this, even though I do this. And I did see somebody's already joined me on Snapchat. I can tell you, my stories are quite good. So if I'm a Snapchat kind of person, and let me see if I can figure out how to do this. You should be. It's just not for inappropriate pictures. It's for fun stuff. So if you guys would do me a favor, I'm going to ask you to say, hey, Andrea, your dad is the best. Would you do that for me? All right.
Hey, Andrea, that's the best. Nationally known.
Oh, I just love that. Oh, wait a second. Did it not? No, it's there. No, I'm like a 12-year-old girl with this stuff. I just get the biggest kick out of it. But I'm going to say, and I don't want to exaggerate the number, but I bet I have 15 people that I met doing this session last year that on a regular basis. I see the one guy, he has one of them, it's like a land skateboard / snowboard, but it has one wheel in it. And he's all over the place, man. And it's impressive looking. And just out of the blue, I'll get, hey, Ed, I got a question for you. I had one guy that got a hold of me, and, well, actually, that was a thing I did in Vegas. But I ended up doing a bunch of classes here in Florida for a contractor that, through Snapchat, that's how he got back a hold of me. So it's kind of a weird medium to use, but at the same time, it's pretty funny. But like I said, when I go places and stuff, or just a typical day, just about every day I'll tell you what the temperature is, and I'll show you that I'm playing golf. Yeah, I like TikTok. I don't do that many videos on TikTok, but I look at puppies and some, very calming, nice stuff, and it helps me go to sleep at night. So I've only been a social media person, like I've only looked at Facebook for about the last year and a half or so. So, yeah, and it took a long time for me to find like-minded people that it wasn't about who can be the biggest idiot. It's more about sharing good content and Brian's platform and all that. I mean, I met Brian for the first time on his podcast. That was kind of a weird deal, but yep. All right, thanks a lot, everybody.
Big thanks to Ed for teaching this class. If you're interested in coming in person or virtually to the 3rd annual HVACR Symposium and get great content like this, great applicable training for the field, whether you are a technician, an installer, a business owner, maybe even an apprentice, then go to hvacrschool.com/symposium.
Thanks for watching our video. If you enjoyed it and got something out of it, if you wouldn't mind hitting the thumbs up button to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the notifications bell to be notified when new videos come out. HVAC School is far more than a YouTube channel. You can find out more by going to hvacrschool.com, which is our website and hub for all of our content, including tech tips, videos, podcasts, and so much more. You can also subscribe to the podcast on any podcast app of your choosing. You can also join our Facebook group if you want to weigh in on the conversation yourself. Thanks again for watching.